class.
Okay, just time out for a second. Yeah. So, just to prove this point, my office is quite a ways away from where Dave teaches. I mean, quite a ways away. And the door was closed, and I could hear this muffled screaming coming down the hallway to the point where I literally got up and I was like, I need to find out what's going on. So I just want to assure
mildly energetic is not accurate.
Dave is understating the case.
Yes.
Sorry.
Welcome to Hallway Conversations. We're a trio of educators who have plenty of questions about teaching and learning and school culture, and we believe in the value of collaboration and reflection as we seek to keep growing as teachers. So this podcast is our place for thinking out loud together about issues in education and why they might matter to Christian educators. Welcome to the conversation.
Hello everyone, welcome to Hallway Conversations. My name is Matt Beamers.
And I'm Dave Mulder.
I'm Abby DeGroat.
Richard Mao has a wonderful book titled The Life of the Mind. It is a short but important book, and I encourage you to read it. Chapter 11 in that book is one I've read many times. It's called Safe Spaces for Playing Around. In that chapter, Mao says, safe spaces are essential for intellectual explorations. And he goes on to share a vignette of having a hallway conversation with a colleague that often concluded with the colleague stating, well, I have to get back to my office to play around with a few ideas. As we begin season 3, I think those lines capture what we are trying to do here. We're trying to create safe space for all of us, you and us, to learn together. And one of our deep hopes is that you might be encouraged to go back to your classroom, your staff room, your boardroom, or your hallway and play around with some new ideas. If you are new to Hallway Conversations, one of us brings a question or we respond to a question from a listener each week. And the questions from the listener, quite honestly, are the most fun for us. In that context, we would like to hear from you. So please email us or send us a recording of your question, and we'll do our best to play around with it. Please send your questions to hallwayconvospod@gmail.com. That's hallwayconvospod@gmail.com. Today's question comes from Dave Mulder, and here it is.
All right. So we're just at the end of our first week of teaching for our semester here, and I guess this is the question that I've been playing with myself for this week. What's something that you have learned or remembered about teaching after this first week? Something you've learned or remembered about teaching after the first week? Looking at you, Abby. Where should we start?
All right. I remembered... And I forget because we ended at the end of a semester, right? Obviously. How important it is and also how hard it is to get to know students. Mm-hmm. If you have no conception of who they are coming into a class, right? So this is the first fall that most of my students I've actually had before. So I started teaching an intro level class 2 years ago where I had all of our level 1 students here at Dort, and now those students have matriculated up into my upper level classes, whereas before I was meeting all those upper level students for the first time in those upper level classes, and now they come in and I've had them before, and I already know them. I know their names, I know like the basics of their story, I know what their majors are and their endorsements, and it's just so much richer right away. I also am teaching that 135 course right now and remembering, I have to get to know all of these new people that I have no idea who they are. So I guess the contrast is what's doing it for me, because before I was always learning everyone, and so maybe I just took for granted, like, this is what you do. But now I'm realizing with that contrast, like, this is a lot. Right. To learn that, it's tiring, but it's also like it shows in those upper level courses how much it pays off.
Totally.
When you do it well, because we're just like on the ground, rich in conversation, running in ways that would not have been possible if I didn't know them already.
So as you're saying that, I'm thinking about when I taught middle school, and I taught 7th and 8th graders. So you typically would have, and I know there's schools that do looping where even at the elementary level, you might end up teaching the same group of students.
Sure.
And how great that is with that group of students that you already know. And like you're saying, you just feel like you can hit the ground running right out of the gate. And that doesn't diminish the importance of taking time to get to know the new students too, right? But that is something to remember for us.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, I taught with an amazing teacher, Heidi Walters. And one of the things she told me at the end of a year is what sometimes made it hard is that, when the year starts in September, she's a grade 1 teacher, she was she was teaching students who just came out of kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
And when the year ended, she was teaching students who were on the cusp of going into grade 2.
Yeah.
And then having to start all over again in September. Not all of a sudden, like, I'm teaching grade 2s in June, and in September I'm teaching kindergartners who are just, and just the contrast, like the energy, and to take the long view. I think that's one of the things so I remembered actually Heidi's words this week, because in the when we started school last week, I suddenly missed my students from last April.
Totally.
I was like, man, like, we worked hard, we learned together, we built relationship together, and now I'm starting all over again. But then I also remembered, I can't wait for December. Like, not to be done, but like to have that, like, because I don't know any of these students, so in that sense, like, I get one shot at this, and I got 4 months, and we're starting from scratch. And so I was reminded of, like, the importance, as much as I want to get to my to-do list, like I got these learning targets, I got these things to do. I was just reminded the importance of investing in some of that relationship building, whether you're teaching 5-year-olds or 20, 21-year-olds. Like, you just need to do some of that hard work, because it allows all those other things that you want to happen in class to happen. It pays dividends, right? So you're investing in that sense. For something greater, like it pays dividends relationally, but even learning wise, because you're trying to create this safe space where people can put themselves out there, and we know, like how students feel at the end of their first week of school, whether university, grade 1, middle school, is generally how they might feel about it at the end of the year. So you sort of want to hit the ground running relationally to say, hey, like, we value the learning, but we also value you, and I'm not going to sacrifice one for the other.
No pressure, but
no, but there's a truth. There's a truth to that, right?
Sure.
And I don't mean it as a pressure.
Not at all. No.
But it's just I'm conscious of that in my own teaching. Whether we like it or not, they're forming judgments in that first week. Right. And I was reminded of that this week.
Yeah.
And so, pressure or not, we know that to be true. How about you, Dave? Week 1 done?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm always struck by, I have a reputation for being very energetic and enthusiastic in class.
Okay, just time out for a second. Yeah. So, just to prove this point, my office is quite a ways away from where Dave teaches. I mean, quite a ways away. And the door was closed, and I could hear this muffled screaming coming down the hallway, to the point where I literally got up and I was like, I need to find out what's going on. So I just want to assure
mildly energetic is not accurate.
Dave is understating the case.
Yes.
Sorry, I digress. Go ahead. No.
Well, and I guess I would just say I was reminded how much that enthusiasm really does matter for setting that context. And not like I want to just like act a role. I've said to students before, because I talk, teaching future teachers, and I talk with them about this. It's like, you have to be yourself. Right? And I still sometimes, after how many years I've been teaching, think of this like, so I'm playing a character when I'm in the classroom, but the character is me. Yeah. It's just me with my eyebrows up, but I'm going to talk with my whole body, right? And especially at the beginning of the semester, I just feel like that's such a welcoming thing to demonstrate that kind of enthusiasm. And so, I guess being yourself matters, but Come in with your eyebrows up if you can, right? What do we get to do?
Were you also tired, Dave?
Oh, I was exhausted. And that's, I think, the funny part, right? Like, teaching takes so much out of me, and I love the work. I love every part of what I get to do. I said this to my wife the other night. It was just last night, and it was 8:30. I was like, I'm exhausted. I think I'm going to go to bed, and I didn't go to bed, but I could have. And I probably would have fallen asleep if I'd gone to bed at 8:30, because it's just exhausting work.
It is.
These first couple weeks. Do you feel that too?
Yeah.
And I feel like it's physically exhausting. Like, it takes a lot, I'm sure everyone who's listening, no different than the three of us, you're literally putting your whole self into it. Physically, you're putting your whole self into it. Emotionally, right? Like, you have to be fully present and paying attention and listening, and you're sort of you think about, at any age level, all the decisions you're making in even a 45-minute lesson. Do I respond? Do I answer? Do I respond to this question? Do I, deal with that classroom management issue? Like, there's all these, literally these moving parts in a classroom. and I find it exhausting. I was also reminded, like this week, of just the work that goes on behind the scenes to make sort of this 45-minute lesson.
Right.
Hopefully, there's no guarantees. We all know that as educators, in the hopes that something magical might happen in those 45 minutes.
Yep.
But I just think about I almost forgot in a few short months, like the amount of intentional planning that has to take place, where things, and finding that balance of like, here's the script,
right?
But how do I also play in the sandbox with it? Like Daryl, my friend Daryl DeVore often talks about like plan tight, hang loose, right? And sort of that idea of like, and that's a delicate balance, and even that in itself can be exhausting. So I think I was just reminded of that, of all the work that it takes, and I know our listeners know that too.
Right. And that planning is especially important, I think, in that first week.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Even more so.
Right.
Why do you say that?
Than later. Well, yeah, and I was reminded of this yesterday. I did a group work project in one of my classes where they had to prep something, and then I had like a protocol to go through, and I gave them, these are college students, I gave them roles in their group. So they either had to like be the presenter and report out, or they had to be like the manager and like keep everybody on task. They had to be like the reflector on how it went. They had to be so they had very specific tasks, and they had a very specific like questions to answer about their work. And as I was setting it all up and making all of these Google Docs for all 7 groups, and I was like, is this overboard? Like, I was questioning myself, right, as I was prepping it. Because I'm like, this is a lot. And
it's a lot.
And these are seniors in college, right? Is this necessary? Could they have these conversations without all of this? And then I asked them very specifically on there how it went. And the feedback I got on how much they liked the structure totally convinced me that it's worth that extra work to set them up well to have those conversations. Like, we could dig deeper into this because we knew exactly what our role was and exactly what we were supposed to be doing, and they didn't have to like figure that all out among themselves, and so it allowed them to get further with the material.
That's a good reminder, though, right? Like that level of intentionality, and especially at the beginning, right? That to set some expectations. Like, does that mean I have to do all of this work every time? Also, well, it might, but it also kind of says to the students, like, I'm going to be prepared for this class, and you're going to come here and you're going to work in this class, and you're going to learn a lot. And
this is not just like a social hour. I have very high expectations for this to be like a productive meeting where you are learning from each other.
But I also, one of the things I noticed that you also just said is I asked them for feedback on it. Like, I actually really appreciate that you said that, Abby. Like, because that actually can take courage, like to say, like you're basically saying, evaluate this work, evaluate my work here. Like, was it worth it? And to get that kind, specific, and helpful feedback from them. And it's just a reminder for me, I think, and and I encourage teachers too to ask the question, and also hopefully to trust that it's not, the response is not personal, like whether it's good or like you're just asking for feedback. And I'd also say, if you don't really want it, don't ask, actually. Honestly,
if you're not going to do anything,
you're not going to do anything with it, right? So I appreciate that. How about Dave? Another thing that comes up for you as you think about this?
So I teach a lot of first-year students, and for any listeners out there, if you're teaching students in times of transition, so I'm thinking of kindergarten teachers, folks who are teaching kids coming into middle school, kids coming into high school. I teach a lot of first-year students. Just to normalize asking questions, that questions are good. Questions are normal. It's okay to ask questions. I always tell students, I get worried when no one's asking questions, because then I think everyone's just nodding along and pretending, right? But I've had that reminder so clearly this week. I try to meet up with all of my first-year students in just a little 5-minute getting to know you conversation. And I was reminded again how much that matters, and actually just to hear their story in their own words, and to like make that kind of deliberate time. And then I always close those conversations, what are you wondering at this point? And the diversity of wonders that they have, from like, how does our field experience for this class work, to, okay, when are papers actually due and how do we hand them in, to, am I okay if I am late to class once in a while because I need to grab lunch, or, like those kinds of wonders. And it just normalizes that, like, that it's okay. to wonder things.
Yeah.
And I don't know. That I feel like sometimes we as teachers, I'll point the finger at myself. I as a teacher somehow like expect students to just know things.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's content, sometimes it's more procedural things, but like I was reminded how important it is to teach them the things that I want them to know. And if I can welcome them to wonder and to ask questions about the content, about the process, about the procedures, about the protocols, that helps. It brings them along and invites them in. This is something done for them and not something to them.
Well, and just as I hear you talk, Dave, one of the words that comes to my mind is just the word hospitality, right?
Yeah.
In a sense, you are the host.
Trying to be.
And, and especially if you're new and everything is new, like you've never lived away from home, you've never literally everything is new here. There's that can lead to feelings of insecurity, right? And you just want to. So just the idea of like, hey, I feel cared for. Like it reminds me of like in elementary school, if you're a new student and you're among many people who know all the unwritten rules, they're not thinking about the learning or the lesson. They're like, I just want to know where the bathroom is.
Right.
I just want to know where I have to sit when I enter the room. Like, please just don't make me partner up on the first day with people I don't know, because I know that's how that's going to go. And so I think in different age levels, it just reminds me of like, hey, like what does it mean to be a good host as the adult in the room and create those safe spaces? Because I and this is true as adult, at least I can speak for myself as someone who's 49 years old now. Little things are still big things. Like those little, like having been new here in this community last year, man, like it was unsettling to come from a place where I felt like I knew the culture, the community, the unwritten rules, the written rules, to come to a place where it's like, I don't even know, like, if I can do, is this expected or not? It's like, and who's going to tell you? And you both know you actually were both really important people for me last year, to find a few safe people to say, as ridiculous as this sounds, I know I can ask Abby or Dave any question. And for teachers to create that culture in their own classroom, as ridiculous as it sounds, it's not. I'm asking you to trust me with this. I will honor the question.
For our students, for their families.
Other new teachers.
Colleagues.
Right? Like, what does it mean to care for them? It also, Dave, made me think, like, this idea of asking questions, like, I'm really going to put you guys on the spot here, but wasn't there, this is very random, this idea of, like, as teachers, when you use the phrase something like, what questions do you have for me? So help me out.
Normalizing.
Instead of saying, do you have any questions? If you can just reframe that and say, what questions do you have? Right? Because it does make an expectation that like everyone has questions. And so, do you have any questions? People say, well, I don't want to be the numbskull who's asking, right? But what questions do you have? Or I've even heard teachers say, okay, I'm going to pause here. Ask me 3 questions.
Wow.
And like, what happens then, right? Like, you're just going to wait until someone asks that 3rd question?
No.
Someone's going to ask then.
No.
I agree.
Abby, anything else coming to your mind or after your first week?
I not only taught this week, I sent 3 kids to grade school, right?
Yes.
Give us a parent perspective, Abby.
Right, so I have a 5th grader and a kindergartner who are both in transitions. And I have a 3rd grader who's kind of in the middle. So like we're on the cusp of like the middle school age, and then I've got my baby going to kindergarten. And so I think too, and then randomly we had a family death, and we had a fly to California this weekend after the first week of school. And so my kids were kind of scattered to the wind after the first week, and I didn't see them until Monday morning again, right? They were in bed when I got home.
Wow.
And so I think too, just as a parent, like realizing how much families have going on that we don't necessarily know the whole story of.
It's a good reminder.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
we see a slice.
Yeah.
And there's a lot going on in everyone's life. Yeah. And so just that grace, I think, is really important.
It reminds me, your story also reminds me, I have a daughter who's a sophomore in high school, and still we're in a new place, and just how tired she was at the end of just being around all these people and the learning, and again, I appreciate that you say that, Abby, like to not make assumptions about our students, or that that they might love school, but it's just hard for them for different reasons, and many times the reasons we don't know, and how do we
can't fully
know, right? I said to students, I think on Friday, like to remember, like when you enter a classroom, to remember as a future teacher, right? Like your classroom for some students is going to be the safest 6 hours or 7 hours of their day, right? And so how do you give that strong sense of belonging and safety and care? And the last thing on their mind that day might be, numeracy or literacy. It's all about emotional care, and they might be distracted, and it really, and quite often, and we know this to be true, has actually very little to do with school. It actually, there's all those other things circling around in their head.
Feel that, like, teaching is such a fearful thing, isn't it? Like, when you actually step back and think about what we get to do, what we're called to do here, it's a fearful thing. And not in a negative sense, right? But just, I guess, in the awe-inspiring sense of, let's not take this lightly, that we have an opportunity to speak into our students' lives.
No, Dave, and it does make me think, like, we're in a place where we work where they often talk about people holding different offices, right? And the privilege of holding the office of teacher. And the responsibility that comes with that, right? Yeah, we get to do this, but I also can find myself in a good way being humble to think, man, like, God's called me to this. Like, what a privilege, right? Like, it's like, wow, like, I can't believe he's invited me into this. Like, and I say that, like, as an encouragement for myself and for our listener, like, to be confident of that call, but it also helps me on those days where I feel like this is a lot, like, this was just really hard today. Like, I just can't, how do I keep going? And to be honest, and I can only speak for myself, is that strong sense of calling is what kind of carries me in that day, is to say, all right, Lord, you've called me to this.
Now equip me for the work.
Yeah, equip me for this work, because it feels really hard. And on the days when it doesn't feel very hard, to have that strong sense of calling, and also to have a heart of gratitude for that, right? To be thankful in all circumstances, so to speak.
Amen.
That's a good ending.
Friends, we know that your time is valuable, and we want to thank you for playing in the sandbox with us. Whether you have already started or are preparing to start, we hope that the Lord gives you what you stand in need of this school year. We'd like to send you into this day and this week with a blessing. So to our listeners, who we are so thankful for, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace, and give you peace, and give you peace. Amen. Have a good week, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
This podcast was quite literally dreamed up during one of our actual hallway conversations. Our music is by Ethan Mulder. Hallway Conversations is an independent podcast created and produced by Matt Beamers, Abby DeGroat, and Dave Mulder. Thanks for listening.